Switchgrass may be the ultimate grass for whitetails and wildlife combined. Switchgrass has the ability to stand up all winter long in most locations, and even in the springs here, you can see the switchgrass around me just pops right back up, bounces right back up, and it's ready to provide cover when the snow and frost and freeze does smash it down. If you get excessive snow right away in the spring, we'll have the new growth coming soon, and switchgrass is probably the ultimate whitetail and wildlife planting for a lot of open field areas. Now I'll talk about some of those uses in a little bit, but I want to talk about frost heating switchgrass. Say frost heating switchgrass is the easiest way to establish switchgrass, and it's in a highly effective way. And I'm going to talk about how to do that. You have to get switchgrass on the soil, the seed on the soil. You have to have great seed to soil contact. So you can't just go throw it out in a sod base and expect it to grow. Frost heating switchgrass can take place in most locations in the north half of the country anytime from October 1st all the way through March 1st. We're out here in mid-March right now, and there's a lot of frosts and freezes coming soon, along with a whole lot of moisture, and that's what you need to germinate switchgrass. You need to get a lot of frost freezing, and so that's why we talk about frost seeding. Switchgrass needs to go through a stratification process, so that seed has to open up either with numerous rains and moisture, or through frost, freezes, and those combinations going back and forth, or both. So right now, mid-March is the perfect time. I could have frost seeded in October. That seed is very hardy. It would have just laid here on the soil and then grown. So frost seeding, typically we're talking screening down here, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But screening, I frost seed at a rate of 8 to 10 pounds per acre because I want a very thick stand of switchgrass. I urge you to buy the tallest, thickest switchgrass variety for your area. In most areas, southern Wisconsin over to Michigan, Pennsylvania, you go to southern Minnesota, down into northern Iowa, northern Indiana, northern Illinois. Cave and Rock is a perfect pure stand of switchgrass that you can apply. It's a great proven stand. We get that switchgrass right around to 7 to 8 feet tall around here and very thick. You want that monoculture of a single variety. And so once you've decided this is the area and you have exposed soil and you get that seed on the soil and you're frost seeding anytime, again, from October 1st to March 1st, that seed's on the soil. Now the number one failure of switchgrass is being overtaken by weeds. And so you have to practice a lot of weed control. Now you can just go without weeds. We have soil right here. We could throw the switchgrass on the ground. In that case though, then we're gonna have weeds that are going to outcompete that switchgrass for sure. Once that switchgrass is shaded out, it dies. Now I'll give you an example. You can see the redneck blind behind me. This area was Egyptian wheat. I actually mixed frost heated switchgrass into it, and what we found was the switchgrass looked really good in through about August, end of July, 1st of August with that Egyptian wheat. Slowly that Egyptian wheat took over, shaded out the switchgrass, and except for this outside 1 to 2 feet that were in that switchgrass and had full exposure to the sun right here, it was shaded out and killed. I wanted to try that combination because I thought that'd be cool to put those two together. You'd have the ultimate screening for 1 year and the follow-up with the switchgrass. But folks, don't try it at home because it did shade out and kill it. And that's what happened here. So if you forget about the chemicals and you put that switchgrass in, if you don't do anything, it's going to die. So I urge you, if you follow that method, you can come in here at the end of August. You can mow down to the top of the switchgrass. It's 2020 or 2019 right now. If we go into 2020, then you could mow in June, July, and August right down to the top of the switchgrass again. You could actually do that in 2021 if you still have a lot of weed competition, and you're going to get a catch of switchgrass. It will not be the best. You might have really good luck, you might have really poor luck, but you're gonna hit an average. I find that a lot of times when you're mowing switchgrass, when it gets to year 3 or 4, that's why you see a lot of people burning switchgrass, because they're not using chemicals initially to establish it. You get a poor stand, you burn it, creates that thicker stand of switchgrass, and that is a way to build for the future 5, 6, 7 years down the road. However, what I found with using chemicals, and we'll talk about that recipe right now, is that if I'm using chemicals to establish this frost-heated switchgrass, then at the end of year 2, I'm gonna be where I am if I'm burning that switchgrass at year 5 or 6. I'm gonna be a long ways ahead, and certainly a lot thicker stand at the end of year 2 than I'm going to have at the end of year 3 or 4 with just simply not using chemicals and simply relying on mowing. So I'm putting the switchgrass down on the ground, and just before spring green up, which we're at that point, this ground is starting to get soft. It can absorb spray and chemical. And spring green up right now is going to explode soon because we've had so much snow and cold. When all the snow is off the ground and this bright sunlight's hitting, that we're going to get green. By the time it hits green, it's too late. And what I'm doing is I'm spraying approximately 3 quarts per acre of simazine. If you have clay or sandy soil, you're spraying less or more, but 3 quarts will hit the average. And just for simplicity, 3 quarts will work in your area. You're putting 3 quarts of simazine per acre before spring green up. Once you see green in the ground, it's too late to put simazine down. Simazine is important. It's atrazine it's a similar chemical to atrazine, but you don't need a chemical applicator's license to buy simazine where you do with atrazine. Atrazine is used for corn and it's used for switchgrass. It's a pre-emergent, so it's going to kill weeds that will be showing, that will be coming soon. And it's not going to kill all of them. You might get a kill of 60%, 50%, 70, 40, whatever that number is. You're not going to get a 100% or a 90% or 80% kill in those areas, but it's a great start because you can limit the amount of spring green up weeds that are going to occur within that switchgrass, and that's that first step. And so that simazine application is very important. Again, 3 quarts per acre. Once you've seen green in the ground, it's too late to spread or spray simazine or atrazine. That's the first step. So I'm making sure that when green does take place, I'm limiting the amount of weeds. Now the second step, switchgrass will not germinate until the same temperature, or right around the same temperature as corn, which is 56 degrees, 58 degrees, somewhere around there. And so I have some time yet. Here in Southwest Wisconsin, it's mid-March. We're getting the simazine on the ground. It's going to stay in the ground for 60 days. So keep in mind, if you're spraying on any food plot areas, if you're planting a spring planting of soybeans, it's not going to work out too well if you put the simazine in the ground first. So it's going to stay around 60 days in those switchgrass areas. And mid-March, we're putting that down. We've already frost seeded. And then that switchgrass is not going to germinate typically around here until early June. We have pictures of it germinating in the end of May. The end of June, it's about 2 inches high, 1.5 inches high, so very small at that time. What that means is you have a window to spray again, and I strongly encourage you do so. Again, the death of all switchgrass is weeds and being outcompeted when it's young. And so around here, we'll have our spring green up in early April, end of March. It's coming soon again. And I'm going to fast forward about 4 weeks when those weeds are approximately 8 to 10, 12 inches high and growing aggressively. And that is a great time to spray. And you're not going to hurt the seed at all because it's not emerged yet. You know, again, simazine's a pre-emergent, and then I'm using 2 quarts per acre of glyphosate and 1 pint per acre of 2,4-D. The 2,4-D is a broadleaf killer. The glyphosate is a post-emergent killer. It does have, there are weeds that are a little bit resistant to Roundup, but I find those stubborn broadleaf weeds, when you add that 1 pint per acre of 2,4-D, that's a classic farmland agricultural mix. You're not going too far outside the realm of potential weeds and chemicals you could use, weed sprayers. And so I'm spraying that about 4 weeks after spring green up. I'm spraying when those weeds, when it's in a warmer days approaching, when there's great growth. And the faster those weeds are approaching and they're coming on, then the easier it is to kill them. I'm not waiting until they're 2-3 feet tall, because then I have all that weed debris for that switchgrass to try to go through, and that weed debris can out compete them. So again, I'm spraying that simazine before spring green up. Once spring green up hits, I'm waiting about 4 weeks, which around here would be the 3rd to 4th week of April. I'm spraying that 2 quarts per acre of glyphosate, 1 pint per acre of 2,4-D, and then I'm letting the switchgrass go. And you're going to find you're going to probably kill 90 to 95% of the weeds with that spraying application process, and you're going to have a great start for your switchgrass. I'm letting it go through the summer. If there's some stubborn weed problem in that stand, then I'd start that mowing process too. But what I found is if you're putting the switchgrass in with chemicals, you don't have to do that. Once I get to the following spring, so 1 year from now, I'm spraying simazine again at 3 quarts per acre. That's my last spraying on that stand, and I've seen stands like that, created like this, that have lasted 8 to 10 years where you still have 80 to 90% switchgrass in that field. And so a great method. You don't have to start burning at year 4 or 5 because you established a poor stand. You're establishing a clean stand. You're spraying that second year with simazine, and then you're letting it go. You can spray it if there's stubborn broadleaf with 2,4-D. Once those plants are 8 to 10 inches higher, you can spray that way to maintain broadleaf. But again, if you're spraying with the simazine pre-emergent, the combination of glyphosate, which is Roundup, and 2,4-D, then you're getting a great stand of switchgrass you typically don't have to maintain. You're following up 1 year later with the simazine, and that's it. You're getting that frost seed on the ground between October 1st and October 1st and March 1st. That's switchgrass. You need to have great seed to soil contact, and that's that recipe. Very effective, highly effective. Now, there's a lot of great applications where you can add switchgrass for bedding or screening cover. Now, if you have a previous soybean field or corn field, so easy. It's already open soil. You can just put that switchgrass in there. It's very effective. You get great seed to soil contact. If you want to plan ahead, in some areas it's appropriate to have Roundup Ready beans, and I'll use that specifically so that I can follow up with a frost seeding of switchgrass for the following year. So it might not be that I want food in that location. It's not even a perfect fit, but it's something I could add to the property with a little bit of food for that year, especially in initial property plans where you're starting an initial food plot program. Putting that Roundup Ready soybeans, I can combat the weeds, give some food to the deer, and then the following spring I'm frost seeding. In an area like this, we're actually using switchgrass in a lot of different ways out in this open field and valley system right here. You can see where the redneck is behind me. We have a newly created mountain bike course behind there. We're actually filling this end right here with switchgrass this year. There's a lot of soil exposure even back around the redneck. We're actually moving the redneck right up top over here into a patch of switchgrass that's already there. We'll get a better angle of shot, and then we don't have to look through this massive sea of switchgrass that I'm adding right here because I'm frost seeding switchgrass that way about 15 to 20 yards behind the camera. So this whole end will be in switchgrass. This is the closest contact and exposure to that bite course. So we're actually taking food out because we can't keep it hidden. We're going to hide it behind a wall of switchgrass in here. And then I already have switchgrass that's going along the food plot all the way around, and over on this side, we're strengthening this side. It's a washout area, so we're also using switchgrass for erosion control. We had some erosion at the top of this food plot over here. We're walling that off in switchgrass so we could really contain this food plot down here. It'll be completely hidden in switchgrass. And again, it's not a great food plot. It's not a perfect food plot unless it's hidden. So we're hiding that this year. Now that being said, we have some 1-year-old switchgrass around here that we're adding simazine to this year. And that's the last time of weed control. We'll expect that switchgrass to grow thick. That switchgrass added back in that pocket will create additional bedding opportunity now right here in the middle of this valley. We've already added pockets up here, a couple lines of switchgrass. We have a line of switchgrass over here, pocket. So what we're starting to do with the switchgrass is starting to take a vacant field that had been idle for decades. Literally, it was the 50s when this was last farmed or cut or pastured, and there's very little out here. So the switchgrass, we've actually seen wildlife starting to come out in the field, including rabbits and pheasants, where this was all open before. It would all lay down during the wintertime. There was no cover. Now that we have the switchgrass, we have rabbits, we have pheasants. And so this isn't all about whitetails. This is something that switchgrass is an effective tool to actually promote a lot of different types of wildlife. And no, we're not planting this whole thing in switchgrass. That would actually be bad. There'd be no browse out here. Wildlife do not like solid patches of switchgrass, big stands, maybe rabbits a little bit. But we have broken pockets of switchgrass and lines out here. We're using the flat areas and the elevation, the benches, and the small little flat points that are in this inside of this field. Because we're adding all that structure out here, now we have the goldenrod, ragweed, little bits of clover, alfalfa. We have a nice base of daytime browse, and we're surrounding that and blocking off a lot of those areas that are visible to the outside here with switchgrass, and now we're creating actual bedding opportunity out here. We don't want solid switchgrass. We don't want solid weeds that are laying down during the winter time. And we don't want certainly a native grass mix down out here of a little bit of switchgrass where they have a pound, pound and a half, 2 pounds per acre, and then big blue stem, little blue stem, Indian grass, because again, that's just laying down all winter and it's defeating the entire purpose of what we're trying to do. In fact, it'd be laying down here during the hunting season when we get into December with our heavy wet snows that we get in during that time, and even in November. So switchgrass, solid switchgrass, strongest variety. We're using for screening out here, bedding, wildlife. We're using it to fill in areas that are erosion. We're using it to block a major area of our biggest exposure area, which actually becomes a great access area. If we want to put a pop-up back here in the switch, we could access through the switch, not spook the deer behind. We're adding a mock scrape right down there. This flows with everything else around here, the ag land. We have water holes up here, here. This is a time where we're planning and putting it all together, frost heating switchgrass on your land. Whether you're planning for it for next year, you're using open soil for this year, now is the time to put in, and boy, it can help a lot more than just whitetails. We love seeing the rabbits and pheasants that are out here too, all the songbirds and all the wildlife that relates to this in general, where it's not that monoculture grass, it's not that monoculture switchgrass. It's a lot of diversity in between, and it all starts with frost heating switchgrass. It can be something easy that you can do right away. And that's the recipe. I hope it makes sense.